All right, this is the last household choice we're going to look at. We're back to consumption, but instead of looking at consuming good A versus good B, we're going to look at the decision of consuming now versus saving to consume later. We're going to look at this within the framework of what we call our two-period consumer model. So we just simplify life down to 2 periods. In period 1, you're working and earning money. In period 2, you're retired. So if you want to spend money in period 2, you have to save some of the money that you earn in period 1. After period 2, we're simplifying. We're assuming there's no savings. There is no period 3. It all ends after period 2. Now here we're going to start at our optimal point. Once again, we're always optimal where our budget constraint is tangent to one of our indifference curves. We want to reach the highest indifference curve we can. That's where our budget constraint, which constrains us, is tangent to one of our indifference curves. So again, we're maximizing our utility per dollar spent at that point. Here, per dollar spent, what's our price? What is the relative price between consumption when we're young and consumption when we're old? It's going to be the real interest rate, which is just the interest rate adjusted for inflation. Okay, it's what we can buy with the interest that we earn. So here, the interest rate is going to be the relative price between consuming in period 1, consuming when we're young, and consuming in period 2 when we're old. It's an opportunity cost. So the real interest rate represents the opportunity cost of consuming now in terms of foregone or lost consumption in the future. Every dollar that I spend right now, I don't have that in the future, and I don't have any interest that I would earn on that money. So here, again, we're always going to be anchored on the horizontal axis. So the amount of money you earn when you're young isn't going to be affected by the interest rate. The interest rate affects your savings. So every dollar that you save, you're going to get that back plus the interest that you're going to earn. So the interest rate here now is going to govern the slope of this budget constraint. So where we intersect on the vertical axis, that's if you saved all of your money, you would get that back and you would earn interest on it. So again here, the interest rate, it's going to be the relative price. So we're going to see when there's a change in relative price, of course, again, we're going to have a substitution effect and we're going to have an income effect. But it's the relative price between periods, it's an opportunity cost, it's the opportunity cost of consuming now in terms of lost or foregone consumption in the future. So again, we want to maximize our utility per dollar spent. Where does that happen at this point? When our marginal utility of consumption in period 2 equals our marginal utility of consumption in period 1 divided by 1 plus the interest rate. You can think as the dollar spent per unit of consumption now in terms of lost consumption in the future. So we've got it set up. We're here at our optimal point. And we're going to look at what happens when there's an increase in the real interest rate. Again, always a substitution and an income effect. Well, in this instance, when the interest rate goes up, what's going to happen is our consumption now gets more expensive. We always move away from what gets more expensive or towards what gets cheaper. So when the interest rate goes up, the opportunity cost of consuming now goes up. It becomes more expensive. So we are going to see a substitution effect. The substitution effect is going to move us away from consumption when we're young towards consumption when we're old. But there also will be an income effect, right? There's always the substitution effect due to an influence in change, or the influence of a change in relative prices, and an income effect due to the change in our purchasing power. When interest rates go up, over our lifetime, we're going to have more purchasing power. When interest rates go up, over our lifetime, we're going to have more money to spend in both periods. So what you're going to see is the income effect, once again, is going to say, okay, well, I want more consumption when I'm old, but it's also going to say I want more consumption when I'm young. So we went over the labor-leisure model. This is exactly the same with different variables, but technically the way it all works out is the same. Okay, so on the vertical axis, if the interest rate goes up, so the income effect, the substitution effect will both go up. If the interest rate went down, the substitution income effect would both go down. It's the same way as our labor-leisure model. If wages go up, income and substitution effect say I want more consumption. If wages went down, income and substitution effect would both say less consumption. So here it's the same technical framework, it's the same way that we do the graphs. It's just with different variables. So you always have the effects moving in the same direction on the vertical axis in both models. Here, though, for our consumption when we're young, you're always going to have conflicting effects. Just like in our labor-leisure model, for leisure, you will always have conflicting effects. So again, the interest rate's going to go up here. That's what we're going to assume. There's going to be a substitution effect. You're going to move away from consumption when you're young towards consumption when you're old, because consumption when you're young just became more expensive. The income effect is going to say more of both. I want to consume more when I'm young and when I'm old. As the interest rate goes up, I have more money to spread out over my lifetime. So you could have the substitution effect dominate or the income effect dominate, just like we went over with the labor-leisure model. Again, this is a three-step process always. You adjust your budget constraints, step one. Step two, we find our substitution effect, a movement along our original indifference curve to a new marginal rate of substitution. You want your new marginal rate of substitution to equal the slope of your new budget constraint. That's why we showed you with the two goods model, right? We pulled that budget constraint back parallel till it was tangent to our old indifference curve. Here, I'm skipping part B. Okay, it happened, it's in here, that's why I say A to C instead of A to B, but we're skipping that. We're showing you the starting point and the ending point. So for both of these, the substitution effect said less when you're young, more when you're old. Less in period one, more in period two. The income effect is going to say more in both periods. On the left-hand side, the substitution effect dominates. How do I know? Well, because A to B, the substitution effect was going to take us to the left. B to C, the income effect was going to take us to the right. We must have moved further to the left than to the right because our ending point, point C, is to the left of our starting point, point A. On the right-hand side, the income effect dominates. Substitution took us left, income effect took us right. Our end point is to the right of our starting point. Once again, here at the macro level, well, we're talking about micro here, but at the macro level, we assume that the substitution effect dominates. What we find is as interest rates go up, people are going to want to save more money to take advantage of that higher return on their savings. So here, this was our household choices lecture. This was the last lecture in Act 2, Getting Down to Business. So we started off talking about our two goods model, right? And so we're always going to have what we want versus what we can afford. What we want, our preferences, is going to be modeled by our indifference curve. We're indifferent all along that curve because we maintain the same level of satisfaction. What I can afford is going to be given to us by our budget constraints. Sadly, we are all constrained by our budgets in this world, right? So what I want, what I can afford, my indifference curve, my budget constraint, where are we always optimal? Where they're tangent to each other. So we showed that with our two goods model. We showed what happens when there's a change in nominal income, holding prices constant, just an income effect. And then we held the nominal income constant and changed the price level. We looked at both the substitution effect due to the influence of a change in relative prices and the income effect, the change in our purchasing power. So we looked at both those changes, how it affects our optimal bundle of consumption. Then we looked at two more choices the household needs to make in the labor market, labor versus leisure, work versus play. The wage was our relative price there. It's the opportunity cost of leisure time. We looked at when the wage goes up, our substitution and our income effects. And we showed when the substitution effect dominates versus the income effect dominates. Then here we did our two-period consumer model to show our last household choice. How much do I want to consume now versus how much do I want to consume later? As I was telling you, it's really identical to our labor-leisure model in the way the graph is set up. We just use different variables. So we looked at when the interest rate goes up, right? That's governing the slope of our budget constraint. It's the opportunity cost of consuming now in terms of lost or foregone consumption in the future. So when there's a change in relative prices, both the substitution and the income effect, here we show you with the substitution effect dominating on the left and the income effect dominating on the right. And so that wraps up our household choices. That wraps up Act 2, Getting Down to Business. I will see you next time with the big picture when we start into macroeconomics.